So there's going to be spoilers here, but I'm not going to actually go out my way to try and drop, like, major reveals or anything like that. It's just, I want to actually have the freedom to talk about the movie without having to worry about walking on eggshells the whole video, so there's your warning. So this isn't my usual content, but there was a few movies I wanted to talk about this year that I didn't get a chance to do an individual review for, or ones I did, but I just want to elaborate more on now, a few months down the line. So doing something similar to my top games of the year video for films, here we are. I will try to keep this uncharacteristically short, so without further ado, starting from the bottom. Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. I did not like Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. I have at this point put up a video discussing this, in fairly lengthy detail, but even there, non-exhaustively. That video could have gone on for days, but an hour and 45 minutes, probably enough. And given I was already pretty tired of this movie while watching this movie, you'll forgive me if I'm all around a little bit dispassionate about Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. The Rise of Skywalker is the final installment and closing chapter in the 40-year-old Skywalker saga. Apparently the last two final chapters don't count. Make no mistake, you can like this movie if you want. If you really love The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, this third and final movie is still probably going to entertain you because it's a Star War. And to move so fast anyway, you'll never have time to stop and question anything. There's an ever-growing list of things I just don't like about this film. The YouTuber Eckhart's Ladder, who does great Star Wars content by the way, really thoughtful and positive, typically doesn't go out of his way to be critical about anything, had the best take I've seen on this film. That it felt like the Raptor scene from The Force Awakens stretched to 2.5 hours. Remember that scene? The one where stuff just kept happening, and happening, and happening, and happening, and happening, and tell that to Kanja Club. Yeah, that's pretty much his entire... So Palpatine's back! Not really a spoiler since they've already made it the linchpin of their entire marketing campaign. If they hadn't, maybe it would have been a great reveal. In the previous movie. Not in the first paragraph of the opening text scroll. I specifically remember facetiously describing in a conversation with Sam or someone that the idea of bringing Palpatine back at the last minute is basically just them going, "Surprise, the Emperor's back!" Well, in the end, that's quite literally the way they went with it. They did speak! The galaxy has heard a mysterious broadcast in the sinister voice of Emperor Palpatine. Except it's not a tree, but the Emperor himself. And for what? For Ian McDiarmid, a guy who consistently brings us all to this role, to play a parody of his best-known character, repeating lines from past movies rather than explaining how the fuck he survived the Death Star goddamn explode. It's a controversial statement. I like Rose Tico. The Last Jedi sucked, Canto Bight was a totally irrelevant side quest, and crashing her speeder into Finn was the dumbest thing I've ever seen, but I genuinely feel like removed from that story, or say introduced in the less shit Force Awakens, she'd be a really likeable presence and less derided by fans. At least no more so than anyone else. Face it, every character in The Last Jedi sucked, old and new. And I feel fucking terrible for the harassment Kelly Marie Tran received online. I was just glad to see that she was getting a part in this last movie and they weren't just chickening out and removing her entirely. Give her a chance to wash off the stink of speeder crashing and space horse riding, and she got 76 seconds of screen time. You fucking what, mate? Penny Duck Brandybucks here, everybody. Who? Why? Doesn't matter. The Sith have been extinct for over a millennium. To the common public, the distinction of Sith and Jedi was seen as nothing more than a technicality, and even the Jedi themselves are thought as a myth by the main characters of your own fucking movie, JJ. But Mary motherfucking Esquire of Rohan, random-ass rebel, taking lines from a girl Rose. Ah, yes, I'd heard the Sith had perfected cloning. Fuck off! The Sith have a fleet. The Sith have a cult. The Sith have a language which is packaged in with a standard translation software that a slave boy on Tatooine's able to get hands on, but you need admin privileges to access? What? Why does the Sith Agent Dagger perfectly line up with a 30-year-old Death Star wreck? That makes no fucking sense. Oh, now we got a helmet lady and she wants to kill Poe Dameron. David Hameron, but Rey has 100 in speech. She has 100 in everything. So now Helmet Lady's like, yeah, sure, random woman who just attacked me, you're the best person I've ever seen. You have my sword, and my coin that lets you go anywhere, because we gotta save Chewie after I killed Chewie, but I didn't kill Chewie. Oh wait, it's been 5 minutes and we've got to give Finn something to do. Ah, fuck it, just make him scream Rey again for the 5th fucking time. Look, it's a giant rebel fleet. We're gonna see some cool space battles, fine, no. No, they just show up for the trailer shot and then just sit around being copy-pasted assets from previous movies. Hey guys, it's the ghost from Star Wars Rebels, you won't see it again. Hey guys, it's fan favourite Wedge Antilles, he says one line. The man who destroyed the second Death Star has as much screen time as the lesbian kiss between Miscellaneous Rebel 1 and Miscellaneous Rebel 2. That we only put in here so we could say we put it in here. How brave. I wonder if they cut him from the Singapore edit too. Death Star Destroyer, guys! We got Death Star Destroyers! Because if there's one thing I know Star Wars fans can't get enough of, it's super weapon plot lines! Stop! JJ! Stop! I did not like Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. I don't know who's to blame, honestly. J.J. Abrams, Kathleen Kennedy, Bob Iger. But it's like they only have 3 ideas of what a Star Wars movie is, and they just keep shuffling them around. Super weapons with easily exploitable weaknesses, 3-way throne room scenes with battle going on outside, and a good guy evil family member plot twist. As it stands, The Rise of Skywalker is my least favourite Star Wars movie, and I doubt that's really going to change. I just get nothing from it. Soundtrack? Kind of forgettable. Cinematography? Easily the least interesting of the 3. Action scenes? Boring, honestly. Oh look, the Falcon being chased by a handful of TIEs, when have we seen that before? Oh look, Rey and Kylo are fighting. Again. Maybe she'll even lose this time. Nope. Nope. Can't have that. Wow, 1,000 Star Destroyers. Can't wait to see them lazily float upwards and do nothing. Well, at least we have our established core trio, finally, getting some time to interact and be actual characters. You damaged my ship in the previous scene, what we just saw. Yeah, and you damaged my droid in the previous scene we just saw. And also, you're our best fighter, and because I'm telling you this rather than showing it, it must be true, and is this character development? Well, we need to move on to next scene, so let's go find Wayfinder. Yes, let's do next scene. They fly now. I'm done. Like I said, I've spoken about this movie a lot already, but when it comes down to it, it's just a bewildering film that I'm tired of thinking about, and it's bound to go down in history as one of the biggest failures, not financially necessarily, but in terms of writing, planning, and managing a property, especially one as gargantuan as Star Wars. These films should be taught in schools for how not to make movies. Oh wait, they already are! I'm not a fanboy, angry about them ruining Star Wars. I've already written these movies off as fanfiction, and honestly, I'm currently reading the alternate sequel trilogy, and I'm having a perfectly fine time with that. I'm simply stating, this is a bad movie. Not bad for Star Wars, just bad. But at least it's not the prequels though, am I right? Am I right, guys? We're still telling ourselves that, right? I mean, sure, the sequels were a soulless, unplanned, creatively bankrupt, messy, uninteresting, mind-numbing, seizure-inducing shit show that had nothing, absolutely nothing to say, and no story to tell, but, like, they didn't have politics in them, or something. Checkmate, atheists. Fuck off. Terminator Dark Fate. So, I went on a bit of a Terminator binge earlier in the year, except for Genesis because fuck that shit. In part to prep for this movie, and in part to show my girlfriend the originals. Originals which I hold in very high regard. T2 is probably one of my favourite movies, just after Aliens, and T1, while I never personally felt as strongly about it, on rewatch is actually a pretty perfect movie, especially for a low budget. In the end though, we gave Dark Fate a total miss at release among shitty reviews, but we managed to catch it recently. Somehow, and while it's not good, I can't say I had a bad time watching it. Dark Fate, as a standalone reboot to the franchise, is simultaneously competent enough and watchable, unlike the last movie we talked about, and pretty reliant on the past films, with the return of Sarah Connor and the T-800, but for this reason, I don't know if it would fully please either newcomers or longtime fans. This movie has a couple things going for it. The CGI is impressive at times, particularly with the new Rev 9 Terminator type, and with the opening scene digital recreations of a young Sarah and John Connor, which, while not the first time we've seen this technology in use in recent years, is already markedly better than Rogue One's Tarkin and Leia. Mackenzie Davies, or Davis, I don't know, as this movie's Kyle Reese sent back in time to protect the future leader of the Resistance, was actually pretty good, along with pretty much all the cast. Linda Hamilton returns as Sarah Connor, and along with Arnold as Carl, a domesticated T-800 who lives with his wife, dog, and adopted son, and fits drapes for a living. Those two were pretty much the highlights. Seriously, I love Carl.
This will be very hard to explain to Alicia.
And there were a couple action set pieces which were impressive enough, though also ones which weren't. The first act car chase bored me, honestly. And just like the Falcon being chased with TIE fighters, we've seen this before in just about every Terminator film. And now we get to the problems of the film, which can be summed up with saying, this is the Disney Star Wars Terminator movie. It scrubs half the previous films off the record, setting itself up as the real T3. Then proceeds to destroy the past, kills it if it has to, which it does when it straight up murders child John Connor, and then just remakes it again, but different and worse. Oh no, it's not Skynet anymore, it's the First Order, Legion! Oh no, the leader of the Resistance isn't, quote, some man. Little insensitive Sarah's dead son was that some man, and she's right fucking there. But no, it's you, Danny! A woman! How brave of us, right? So they kill off John just to replace him with ultimately the exact same character except race and gender swapped. And just like bringing Palpatine back just to have him killed off again, except this time by someone else, it feels unnecessary. Just as unnecessary as replacing the iconic Skynet with something which functionally is the exact same, but less interesting. Whatever, this movie wasn't terrible, but it's not only a retread, it's damaging to the legacy of the series. I don't have a problem with them changing the status quo, but you need to do something interesting with it at least. Otherwise it just feels cheap and manipulative. Changing the leader of the Resistance from a white man to a Mexican woman isn't subversive. Not when you just give her all the same character traits and achievements and personality and fucking catchphrases. You, Danny, you told me there's no fate but what we make. You fucking what, mate? Like that one they didn't even take from John, they took from Sarah. Like, why? If you're gonna make an original character, I don't know, make them original? That's all I'm saying. We've seen this same Terminator plot time, 5 times now? And these little tweaks around the edges or superficial changes don't do anything. Oh no, this time the Terminator can split into 2 Minators! Okay, but we're doing the 27th helicopter chase scene, so who cares? T2 was subversive by turning the villain of the last movie into its hero, and even the derided T3, which was otherwise the same movie again, at least had the balls to end with a nuclear apocalypse. This franchise is a mess enough as it is, and it should honestly just stop. But if it insists on dragging Arnie out of retirement for another 30 years, at least do something meaningfully different next time. The Wandering Earth. Oh, yeah, this was a 2019 film. I didn't realise that until I was halfway through editing this video, so just sneak it on in here. When the sun threatens to expand and destroy the Earth and solar system itself, humanity comes together under the Wandering Earth project, in an attempt to push the Earth out of orbit and to a new star light years away, using gigantic engines across the globe, and actually writing a synopsis really drives home how batshit crazy this film is. This Chinese production is a loose adaptation of a novella of the same name, and it is indeed a film I saw. I don't know what to say about it. This wasn't my choice of film. That was Terminator 2, but I can't say it was bad, just insane. Now, while the science is almost all certainly nonsense, there's ideas here that fit an average episode of Doctor Who. Why not? Humanity is forced to live in underground cities to avoid freezing as the Earth makes its way further from the sun, generations of people living and dying underground during the centuries-long trip, and of course, a ticking clock. As while attempting to use Jupiter's gravity to slingshot themselves out of the solar system, engine failures leave the Earth in its ascending orbit around the gas giant, and it's a race against time to transport fusion bomb igniters to relight the engines before the Earth is destroyed. It's a bit Day After Tomorrow meets, I don't know, Gravity or something. Never actually seen Gravity, but I imagine it's something like this, except probably not at all. This movie's insane. A guy shoots Jupiter with a minigun while shouting, "Fuck you, Jupiter." Can't see Sandra Bullock doing that. But whatever, the characters are all a bit nothing, but it's fun, and at times visually spectacular, and on the whole, it's a decent sci-fi flick as long as you don't mind reading subtitles and turning your brain off a little. How did they drive 3,500 kilometers in a couple hours? El Camino. Released exclusively on Netflix, this Breaking Bad movie acts entirely as an epilogue to the show's secondary protagonist, Jesse Pinkman, last seen escaping the spoilers, 8-year-old spoilers. Okay, so right away this movie requires you to have seen Breaking Bad in its entirety, and rightly so. Watching this on its own would be as confusing and self-spoiling as skipping to the last chapter in a book, or, to be a bit more literal, the last episode in a TV show, which this is for all intents and purposes. just one that took 8 years to release. The movie itself is a really simple premise, just focusing on Jesse trying to avoid the authorities as well as other parties, while trying to get enough money to leave town and hopefully start a new life immediately following the events of the show, picking up right where we last saw him fleeing the scene. But in true form to the show this comes from, the stakes and tension of the simple plot are constantly maintained, so much so that a scene involving an old guy watering plants had me on the edge of my seat. So it has admittedly been a long time since I saw Breaking Bad, and there were a few things here which I wasn't sure if I was supposed to remember or not. Characters and locations that I wasn't sure were a callback or not, but it didn't have much of an impact on my enjoyment. But again, and this really is the only criticism I could see about this film being made, I don't think there's much here for non-fans of the show to really get out of it. So even going in deciding that spoilers of the show aren't an issue for you and you just want to see a crime thriller about a guy on the run, I just think this leans too much on the assumption that you already understand the stakes and already know the characters, you've already seen this story arc, and now we're just witnessing the final act play out. But honestly, why would you watch this if you hadn't seen the show? It knows and achieves in being what it has to be, and an accessible stepping on point or a standalone story ain't that. The acting is predictably great, the direction is on point, and the writing is still up to the standard of the phenomenal show that it spawned from. It's not a really easy movie to review, to be honest, because honestly it behaves and feels more like an extended TV episode, which, as I've made clear, it basically is. And maybe because there's not really an overarching story or a typical act structure a standalone film might have. There's a few small twists and turns in Jesse's quest, but nothing that really derails him completely or changes his worldview, puts him on another path from where he started. No, we begin with him running from the cops and wanting to get money to go to Alaska, and bar 2 or 3 hiccups along the way, he gets the money and goes to Alaska. I mean, that is a story arc, technically, so guess it's fine. It's just, there's no real change to the status quo from beginning to end. Not that it makes it any less of an interesting story to see, but it just doesn't really feel like a proper movie, if you know what I mean. Before we ever got this film, I think most people assumed Jesse ran away somewhere. Now we just get confirmation that he did, and this is how he got the specific funds to do so. Again though, I really don't have any issue with this movie. I'm just trying to think of what criticisms might be levied against it, if we're going to be really critical, but who cares? A good, entertaining afterword to an already great series. Avengers Endgame, the most anticipated movie of the insert time frame here. Year? Decade, geological period, take your pick. Everyone's seen it, everyone's talked about it, including me. It came out, people loved it, and then people kinda stopped caring a little bit? I don't have much to say about Endgame, honestly. I mean, at least with Rise of Skywalker, even having so little emotional response to it, I still feel I can talk about it. But with Endgame, it was a great movie. My complaints aren't many, and it was certainly better than Star Wars' big finale, but I also feel no real inclination to watch it again. Following on from Infinity War, we find the universe in the aftermath of Thanos'... Why am I even doing a synopsis? We've already established you've all seen the fucking thing. I loved Infinity War. I've seen it twice, I'd see it again, and it's not just, as some people have suggested, because of the ending. An ending which is still just as impactful knowing now, and honestly knowing then, who would be kidding, that all these people were going to be coming back. You know, it's like Empire Strikes Back to me. It doesn't matter that I've seen the film 700 times, know the reveal's coming, and know now that it ends with a clustered, meaningless shit show, stop it. But Infinity War was more than just a big ensemble spectacle. It had a solid core, being Thanos. It was his movie in every sense, following his hero's journey, just like so many other standard standalone Marvel films before. Endgame, meanwhile, is the big climactic ensemble spectacle. Doesn't make it bad, doesn't make it unenjoyable, but put it this way, I watched Endgame more recently than I did Infinity War, but I remember far more about the journey of Thanos and Thor in that movie than the journeys of Tony, Nebula, Hawkeye, Paul Rudd. It tries to focus on too much, which I think ultimately harms the movie, and that's before getting into the last movie in the story arc introduction of time travel and parallel universes, and the huge mistake of killing off the villain and protagonist of the last movie at the start of this one, and replacing him with a less interesting version of himself without any of the character history or connections to the heroes. Yes, I liked the bit with all the portals opening. Yes, I thought it did a funny when Steve said, "That is America's ass," and the audience did the laugh. And yes, I genuinely did love Tony's big finale. I know it was a hell of a task wrapping up this massive franchise, and this movie does unapologetically act as a referential best of Marvel adventure through its own past movies, but I just don't think it makes for a great film. A crowd pleaser? Absolutely, but more than likely even you watching will admit there's Marvel movies you'd go back to before this one. I feel I'm going to get backlash for this, and whatever, that's fine. Maybe you thought it's a masterpiece. I'm just saying, it's good. I said in my original review that this was a Return of the Jedi follow-up to an Empire Strikes Back masterpiece. There's some of the best shit in the series in this film, but also a lot of Jabba's palace. I know a lot of people have said this, and I imagine it sounds hollow, but no, I am pretty fairly done with Marvel going forward. I'll watch Spider-Man's because I like Spider-Man's, regardless of being part of some larger continuity or not, but I'm done with the obligation to watch every one of these things. That's it. I'm going to talk about something else now. Spider-Man: Far From Home. Fuck. Okay, but honestly, I think I enjoyed this one a little bit more than Endgame, strangely, or maybe not so strangely enough. A small-scale, concise, character-focused story is exactly what we needed after the universe-ending, time-space sprawling Endgame. I've said before that Spidey is my favourite superhero, and I like Tom Holland's version. I think it fits the MCU's very specific brand and universe. Far From Home deals with the aftermath of Endgame, but does so in a more upbeat, comedic way, which, while jarring for some, is totally necessary after two apocalyptic downers, and it's Spider-Man for fuck's sake. He both needs and suits the levity. Not to say that it sidesteps the consequences of the previous film entirely, and it does explore them quite nicely, though more on a personal level with Peter Parker rather than the whole world, though it does have some nice insights there as well. We get yet another classic Spider-Man villain brought to the big screen, this time with Mysterio, and I really liked what they did with him. So I don't think it's a spoiler that he's a villain, right? Like, that's going into a movie called Joker not knowing that he's going to do a crime at some point before the end. He's one of Spider-Man's best known villains, right? Even to non-fans. Maybe not Venom or Doc Ock notoriety, but he's up there. Mysterio was always about illusions and shit, being a special effects guy working in movies, but I like how they updated the concept from a guy using literal smoke and mirrors, practical effects if you will, to becoming the product of an entire team of CG artists, motion capture, sound designers, though with a bit of the fictional MCU tech in there with holograms, but it was a pretty cool idea. Mysterio isn't just Quentin Beck, who was really enjoyable by the way, but a whole team, which raises questions regarding possible future appearances, but say no more. I liked the comedy, and I thought Peter and MJ's relationship was presented here really well, as awkward-ass teenagers. And the action was great while still edging close to the energy beam in the sky territory of finales, even if it is an illusion. In my opinion though, the best stuff in the film was the Inception shit, when you don't know if things are real or an illusion, or several layers of illusions, and I love it, with everything right up to and including the ending being questioned. So we've had two great Spidey movies in this continuity, both among my favourite entries into the MCU, so, like I said with Endgame, even being over Marvel at large, I look forward to, hopefully, more Spider-Man. Alita: Battle Angel. So, I didn't see this when it first came out. I saw the trailers, saw those freaky eyes, knew it was based off something I didn't know, and just let it pass under my radar. Then I heard good things and was like, oh, alright, good for it. And that was the end of all controversy. Oh wait, we're living in this universe, aren't we? So this passion project from James Cameron comes out. Directed by Robert Rodriguez, starring Rosa Salazar with giant eyeballs, and for whatever reason, probably nothing to do with the fact that the first ever female-led movie, Captain Marvel, came out 2 days after this, a media campaign starts on certain websites painting this movie and Cameron in all kinds of shitty lights. And suddenly, anybody who likes this movie or defends this movie is alt-right or something. I don't even know how this started or what fucking media outlets or bad take blogs started it, and I don't want to talk about it further, but all I know is I made sure to go buy this on Blu-ray on release day, because fuck that manufactured controversy. I didn't get around to actually watching it until a week ago, but here we are. Set in a dystopian future where much of the world has been destroyed in a war, the torso of a discarded cyborg is discovered by Dr. Edo, played by the ever-awesome Christoph Waltz, while searching the scrap heap of Iron City built beneath the utopian flying city of Zalem above. Fitting the cyborg with a new body, he introduces Alita to the slums of Iron City while trying to help her connect with her lost memories, which, over time, resurface along with combat skills beyond anything he's ever seen. Cyberpunky world, crazy cyborg fighting set pieces, blood sports, a puppy, and a story clearly much larger than this one movie could handle. Which is why we need a sequel. I think that's the best way I could explain this weird-ass movie without going into detail, but I liked it. Rosa Salazar's Alita is adorable, but I really liked her. Her innocent, naively good-heartedness in this shitty world, while being unforgiving and even merciless in the face of evil, is incredibly endearing and is markedly different from some of the other strong female character TMs we've seen. The action pieces are great. I wasn't sure at first what it was, but there was something that felt a little bit weird, whether it was the CGI characters or I think the slightly slow, deliberate feeling movements. Like, I don't know what it was. I think the uber flashy, super fast Marvel fight scenes have thrown me off a little bit of what to expect from a movie, but I ultimately think this is better. All the choreography is there for you to see, and the film makes damn sure you could follow and feel every strike. If this was done in part to emulate panels from the manga or something, I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not talking about slow-mo, although there is plenty of that. I'm meaning, it kind of just feels like it's a few frames slow, but also really smooth. I don't know, maybe I'm not really making sense at this point, I'll admit, but it's just something I remember thinking while I was watching. This is a very colourful movie too, from the surprisingly appealing orange sunlit streets of Iron City to the neon lights of night. Blue skies, purples, greens, this movie is, if nothing else, just really pleasant to look at. When it comes to the story, it's not exactly the strong point. Like, this universe is interesting, and I actually, when it came down to it, finished the movie wanting to know more, both its backstory and where it's going next. Though I have to admit, this movie does feel like a bit of an intro to a story, rather than a complete one in and of itself. But for the individual character arcs, they're all done pretty well, so on a smaller scale, ground level, it's fulfilling enough. However, the storytelling does need to lose points for being just a bit too exposition heavy, especially in those early scenes where it actually isn't needed. We have the striking image of a floating city in the sky dumping its trash onto a slum below. Like, the visual storytelling is all there, we don't need Dr. Edo to say, "Ah, that is Zalem, it's the last great flying city, all the others were destroyed in the war, it is rich and powerful and we are downtrodden and poor," but yeah, overall, I really enjoyed this. And if you sign me up for a sequel, I'll make damn sure to go and support it. Of course, with the small problem of Disney buying and since rebranding 20th Century Fox and never allowing a movie which isn't Marvel, Star Wars or live action remake to see the light of day, you fucks! Godzilla, King of the Monsters. This was kinda my obsession of 2019. My anticipation for this film outpaced Endgame, Rise of Skywalker, or any other big budget blockbuster, and left me even more of a Goji fan than I already was. Seeking out the original movies, as some of you following me on Twitter might have noticed earlier in the year, buying up the whole Shoei era on Blu-ray, rewatching 2014 and Kong Skull Island for the first time to catch up on the Monsterverse, checking out Japan's own strange reboot in Shin Godzilla, and then waiting patiently for this film to release on home video so I could watch it again. I loved this movie at release. I enjoyed Gareth Edwards' Godzilla, to which this follows on from, but the promise of more original Toho monsters in a Western Godzilla movie was what sold me on this right from that first trailer. And while it's far from a perfect movie, and it didn't perform brilliantly at the box office, I just love that we got, essentially, the Avengers of Godzilla movies, in a world where nearly every other movie has been an Avengers. Or trying to be. Following the 2014 attacks on San Francisco, the world now knows of the existence of giant monsters. While politicians and scientists debate whether these titans should be treated as a threat or learned to coexist with, eco-terrorists, led by Tywin Lannister, begin raising titans in an attempt to curb humanity's impact on the planet. And through events, we're introduced to Toho favourites Mothra, Rodan, and Godzilla's most infamous enemy, King Ghidorah. When I reviewed this originally, I praised the monsters and the action, only complaining at the persistent cutting away to human characters, and that still stands. The fights are still great, though I also add that they are too dark, either taking place at night or in snowstorms or regular storms, but regarding the humans, I've actually found on rewatches that while I still like a handful of characters, Ken Watanabe's Dr. Serizawa, as well as Millie Bobby Brown's character as the daughter of parents caught on either side of this conflict, I basically can't stand anyone else. Charles Dance, as the leader of the eco-terrorists, is fine. He's Charles Blimmin' Dance, and Shang Zi plays a dual role as Doctors Chen and Ling, as a source of exposition, as well as a subtle, less ridiculous take on the Mothra twins. But pretty much everyone else I could have done without, and needs to shut up.
Sarazawa's got that lizard juice.
It's gonna be a bad day to be a Red Sox
Godzilla's
fan.
radiation levels are going
Whatever
through the roof.
Sarazawa did to
He's
Godzilla
going
worked a little
before he
too
goes
well, because he's about to
thermonuclear.
explode.
Shut up.
But as the real stars, it's the kaiju that it has to get right, and it does. The redesigns from suits and puppets to CG managed to both keep the spirit of the originals while being appropriately updated. But the showstealer for me was the villain, King Ghidorah. Ghidorah if you prefer, Ghidra, Monster Zero, Ichini and Kevin, whatever. I don't know why, probably through the games, having never until recently even seen the original Toho films, but the three-headed golden dragon was always my favourite monster. Then there's Mothra. Best girl. Best strong female character 2019. Wait, no, biggest strong female character 2019. The soundtrack is great too, and I meant to say that in my first review but just forgot. Both wholly original tracks like Rodan and Ghidorah's themes, as well as amazing new versions of firstly the original 54 Godzilla theme, and probably my favourite, the 1961 Mothra theme. So a fourth installment in this franchise is coming with Godzilla vs Kong, and the way this movie ends sets up several directions for both the future in that film and beyond if, fingers crossed, they keep this monsterverse going. From Destroya to revived Ghidorah to Mecha Kaiju, and honestly, I'm alright with just about anything. As long as we get a standalone Mothra movie. (1917). I'm really glad I managed to squeeze a viewing of this in on time, literally the day before this video gets uploaded probably, because it's a damn good film and the best war movie I've seen in a couple of years. So war movies are actually one of my favourite genre of film, as vague as that label kind of is. I nominally mean World War I and II, but anything's good. But comparing it to other recent war movies, I really didn't love 2017's Dunkirk, which from the trailers this was kinda reminding me of. But word of its unique cinematography got me interested enough to go see it. Set on the Western Front in April 1917, two British Army soldiers are tasked with crossing the German front line to get a message to the 2nd Battalion before the next morning, when its colonel plans to launch a major offensive against entrenched German lines, unaware of the massacre that awaits all 1,600 men, including one of the two's brother. What is undeniably the most interesting about this movie is how it's shot, using camera trickery and editing to make it feel, from beginning to end, like one great long, uncut take, with the camera following its main characters almost over-the-shoulder style like a video game. In fact, in the most respectful way possible, this more than once reminded me of a video game like Half-Life or something, where I half expected a chapter title to appear on screen as Schofield leaves the back of a truck, which is obviously a disguised loading screen, into a new area. And the fact that the journey is quite distinctly broken up into levels with clear transitions between them, whether exiting out of a dark tunnel or descending into a river at a town and climbing out of it again in a forest, it's very clever, very immersive and just plain impressive filmmaking. There's a surprising number of well-known actors here too that, given it only follows our two mains, Blake and Schofield, get incredibly little screen time, as in one appearance then gone forever. Benedict Cumberbatch, Colin Firth, Richard Madden, but the primary leads Dean Charles Chapman and George McKay especially do an amazing job, with personally the going over scene being one of the best bits of film I've seen all year, I think. Speaking of which, the other thing that really stood out for me was, unexpectedly, the score. And thank God, because the last time I found a great new war movie soundtrack was, I don't know, Fury in 2014. It's been a bit. Anyway, keeping it short here, but great movie, not super action packed, but great acting, great drama, definitely worth a watch. Dragon Ball Super Broly. was easily my funnest movie experience of the year. I still can't quite believe I got to see a feature-length Dragon Ball movie in a cinema, in my hometown no less. The previous films in this now trilogy of modern Dragon Ball movies either had an extremely limited release in the West, with Battle of Gods getting, a 4-day run in the US and only appearing at a couple conventions in the UK, and Resurrection F, if I remember rightly, because I did speak to Sam about seeing it with him at the time, was only showing in a couple major cities in the UK, London, Manchester, maybe a couple others. But here, not only did I get to see it on my doorstep, but unlike those previous films, I and Sam actually were able to arrange a meetup and see the film together. And between that and a packed theatre of fans loving it, this was a joy to watch. And that's before I actually get to talking about the movie itself, which even on rewatches at home, is still a great time. And though I'm sure this will be debated forever amongst fans, might just be the best film the series has ever produced. Taking a pretty divisive character like Broly from the definitely not canon 90s movies, in truth more like extended episodes at 72, 52 and a mere 46 minutes respectively, though in the case of that one it's probably a blessing, this film reintroduces him to the current Dragon Ball canon in a way which, for the most part, makes perfect sense. One of the highlights of this film actually is the first 20 to 30 minutes, which entirely retells and codifies the origins of its central characters, the story of the destruction of the Saiyan homeworld by the tyrannical Frieza, and among all this partially pre-established and partially retconned backstory, manages to actually naturally fit Broly into things in a way where his sudden appearance decades later doesn't feel at all contrived. Now, contrivance does come into play as this Saiyan who's sat out the entire series so far on some backwater planet with naught but a snack doggo for a mate, is able to quickly catch up to characters who have been battling literal gods up until this point. But, you know, we need a movie, and when the action looks this good, who's going to complain? Dragon Ball has always had this stigma of being nothing but a show about characters screaming at each other. And while sure the last hour of this movie is one gigantic, beautiful, amazing, over-the-top 10 out of 10 fight scene, this movie also has a lot of heart and a lot of great characterization. Broly, his father Paragus, Chi-Lai and Limo, two Frieza soldiers who befriend Broly, and not to mention Frieza himself, who continues to ride the greatest character comeback in history after being a complete waste of time in Resurrection F, but being the best thing about the final arc of Super. Honestly, it's Goku and Vegeta, the supposed protagonists, who are the least interesting here. But I hardly blame them for keeping the spotlight on someone else, you know, for once. This is a great movie for a Dragon Ball fan. Now, I can't predict how a non-fan would take this movie, but with a lot of time spent on world building and establishment, something the series often fails on, it's hardly the worst entry-level flick. You know, maybe just have someone there on standby to explain who the purple Catman is and why people's hair keeps changing colour during the modern day stuff, but other than that, it's a great time. A niche film for sure, but definitely one of my favourites of the year. And finally, Joker. I'm not sure exactly what it was, but as soon as I watched the initial trailer for this grimy, depressing 80s origin story for the iconic comic book villain, I was immediately sold. Despite the built-in uphill battle this movie has for being yet another on-screen adaptation of the Joker, the third one in just over a decade, the original reveal for Joaquin Phoenix's version brought the to-be-expected criticisms and comparisons, but that first trailer, for me anyway, just shut all that down. Whether this was going to be a good movie or bad, this Joker was going to be one of a kind. Following the story of Arthur Fleck, an aspiring stand-up comedian struggling with mental illness, a sick mother, and all the other challenges of living on the poverty line in this 1980s Gotham City, it borrows elements from other Joker origin stories, but really isn't an adaptation, nor I'd say a particularly typical representation of the Joker character. As such, I don't really call this a comic book movie, certainly not a superhero movie, and nor is it trying to be. Keeping it a close-up character study of this one man, never in fact leaving him in any scene, barring one flashback and a montage of events happening at the end, we follow Fleck, and only him, uncomfortably so. So, first and foremost, Phoenix is amazing in the role here. Again, you can argue back and forth about whether he's the best Joker, truest to the character and whatever else, but there's no denying he plays this Joker perfectly. I loved the quirks, the unique stamps of the character which stand him out from all the previous incarnations. Hamill's psychotic clown prince of crime, the nihilistic Machiavellian ledger, the one we'd rather forget and or already had, and now this, truly beaten down, disenfranchised man who is undeniably a villain, but one created by the world around him. Now, because we live in this universe, it's difficult to talk about the Joker without also talking about the controversy. Or rather, the media reporting around this movie, which sparked a complete bullshit controversy. Hey, surprise! Nobody got shot while watching this movie. You'd be mistaken for thinking somebody had, by the way certain outlets were hyping this up as the next big movie shooting. It's gonna happen, guys! Just wait and see, any minute now! And then a machete battle breaks out in a viewing of Frozen 2, but that doesn't fit the narrative! We know Flick is struggling, but at least for the first part of the movie, he is coping. Barely, but nevertheless coping through his medication, therapy, and genuine moments of happiness, few and far as they might be. The movie isn't saying that if you're ill, you're gonna start shooting people. That would pin all the blame on the individual. This Joker isn't a product of personal insanity, but by the world around him. The political situation, corruption, degrading life quality for him and everybody else, the rise in crime affecting him personally, leading him to losing his job, the government cutting hospital funding, leading him to losing his medication, and then even those good things in his life turning sour. The social commentary here should be obvious. And if you still struggle to see which side of the political fence this movie's on, I'll give you this one for free. It ain't about incels or white male rage, you clickbaiting out of touch elite bastards.
White male rage, white male rage.
Fuck off. The insistence that this film was going to be a rallying cry for the alt-right or something was fucking laughable. Again, why did they keep doing that this year? This movie's critical of Reagan-esque right-wing policies, media elitism, and has an entirely racially neutral, class-based message. But that doesn't fit the narrative, so never— I've already said, this is not a superhero movie. But if you're expecting a lot of action, don't. What's there, I can honestly say is visceral though. Like, you can watch people getting shot up by the dozens in any action movie and get none of the impact that the handful of violent acts here can elicit. And not because they're so overly gruesome like, once again, certain media outlets kept saying, but no, it's just because they feel very real. I have to admit though, just because it is a thing which happened, there was a guy in the cinema sitting next to me who fell asleep about an hour into this movie, where there was a lot of following Arthur's day-to-day, and slowly things falling into, or more aptly out of place, running towards the end. But the guy was still asleep. Could have just been tired. I do night shifts, I get that. But it goes to say that Joker is creeping tension and character exploration broken up by periodic hard-hitting moments. So, know what you're getting into. But that final scene had me glued to the screen, edge of my seat, holding my breath, whatever turn of phrase you want. Amazing. And definitely worth the wait. I can't say much more about this film without getting into spoilers. The wider connections to the Batman stories are there, more than expected, maybe more than even necessary, but they're fine. I've kept this from just being entirely the taxi driver in clown makeup. I really love this movie though, and while it comes with a lot of caveats, I would recommend it. I figure it's going to have a bit of a love it or hate it, seeing as I've already seen that in my own circles, but at the very least, give it a watch if you're a fan of the character. And that's the list. Thank you very much for watching. The next video that we put up will be the top games of 2019, and that'll be a bit bigger and put a bit more work into that. We're still working through it, I'm still trying to get footage for games. It takes a lot of work, and then after that we'll be returning to Xenoverse content. We're just trying to get through the end of year cycle of things. New movies coming out, a new Star Wars, this video, the top games. It's all the usual this time of year thing, as well as just being so busy with everything else. But I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you again.